Okay, so getting ready for a senior software engineer interview
Yeah,
can be pretty intense, right?
right.
Especially when they start digging into system architecture.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, how would you evolve a system or, the big one these days, microservices. Everybody wants to talk about microservices.
Right.
And then on top of that, like, how would you actually make improvements to a real code base?
Yeah, if you're prepping for that next step up the career ladder,
Right.
or just, want to understand better how these complex systems they build and grow.
Yeah,
This deep dive is for you.
absolutely.
We're going to get down into the nitty-gritty, like practical stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
How do you actually make these architectural choices? How do you look at real code, not just the theory?
Exactly.
So our goal today is to give you a better sense of, okay, when and why are microservices even the right call?
Right.
And how do you even start figuring out where to make the biggest impact in a system?
Okay, so first things first.
Hmm.
Why even think about microservices?
Right.
It seems like everyone's jumping on that bandwagon.
It's like the default answer now.
Yeah. Is it always the right answer, though?
Well, you know what we've been looking at? It really emphasizes
Yeah.
that microservices are a tool, right? They're not the end goal in themselves.
A means to an end.
Exactly. And there's a real danger in getting lost in the weeds of building a system that's all distributed
Right.
without really understanding, like, what problem are you even trying to solve?
Yeah.
We've seen teams, go all in on microservices.
Oh, yeah.
And then suddenly they realize, oh, wow, we just made things way more complicated.
Right.
And we didn't even fix the original issue.
It's like saying, okay, I need to get somewhere faster, so I'm going to buy a private jet,
Right.
but maybe you just needed a better train schedule. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Maybe there's a simpler solution.
Yeah,
And scaling is often a big reason people jump to microservices.
of course.
But think about it. You can often just improve a single application first.
Yeah.
Like plain old load balancing, just spreading out the work across multiple copies of your app. So consider those basic scaling techniques before diving into a really complicated distributed architecture.
I think that's a great point
Mm.
because it underscores that you need a clear goal. You
Actually,
need a reason.
it's your roadmap. It
Yeah.
tells you where to start,
Right.
if microservices are actually the way to go.
Yeah.
Without a clear goal, you're just stumbling around in the dark trying to figure out, okay, what piece of the system
Right.
do we break off first?
Okay, so let's say you've thought about it, you've done your homework,
Right.
and microservices are the right call.
Okay.
What's next?
Well, what we've seen suggests you got to take it slow and steady.
Okay.
Incremental migration. You don't do a massive overnight rewrite.
Ah, the Big Bang approach.
Right. There's that famous saying, if you do a big bang rewrite, the only thing you're guaranteed
Yeah.
is a big bang.
Yeah.
It's super risky.
It's like taking a hammer to a block of stone and expecting a perfect sculpture to just appear.
Exactly. You
Okay.
got to chip away at it carefully. So break the migration down into smaller, manageable pieces.
Okay.
It's less scary that way. And crucially, it limits the damage if things go wrong.
Which they probably will
Probably.
at some point.
Right. And each little step gives you feedback.
Okay.
If something doesn't work quite right, it's contained.
Right.
You learn from it, and then you adjust your next steps. Plus, you get to celebrate those quick wins,
Yeah.
the smaller areas of functionality that are easy to peel off and make into a microservice.
Okay.
Getting those early wins builds momentum. The whole thing feels less overwhelming,
Makes sense.
and you start seeing the benefits of a modular architecture sooner.
So as you're chipping away at the monolith,
Yeah.
what happens to the monolith itself?
Well, it's not like it vanishes overnight.
Right.
What we've seen is that monoliths aren't always bad,
Okay.
and they can stick around even as you're adding microservices.
So you have like a hybrid situation.
Exactly. And the goal shouldn't be to kill the monolith just because the goal is to get those benefits that the architecture change is supposed to bring.
So it's not like a before and after photo.
Right. Real-world systems are messy.
Yeah.
They're always changing as our needs change, and we learn more.
Okay.
Being comfortable with that idea of constant evolution, that's a key skill for any senior engineer.
That's a good point. Now, there might be cases where you do have to completely retire the old system.
Right. Maybe it's built on outdated tech,
Right.
or it's tied to infrastructure that's being shut down.
Yeah.
But even then, you still want to decompose it gradually in phases.
Okay, so this brings us to moving too fast. Premature decomposition.
Ah, yes.
Sounds like breaking things down into microservices before you really get the problem.
Can cause more headaches than it solves.
Yeah.
There's a great example of a team that worked on a continuous integration tool,
Uh-huh.
and they decided to break it up into microservices based on, past experience with a similar system.
Yeah.
But there were these subtle differences in how this new tool was being used, which meant they got the service boundaries wrong.
Ah, so things were split up in a way that didn't really make sense.
Exactly. And it led to tons of changes across different services.
Oh, my God.
Making even tiny tweaks became a huge effort.
Wow.
In the end, they had to merge everything back into a single app.
So they basically undid all their work.
Yeah, just to better understand how things actually work together.
Wow.
A year later, once they had a clearer picture, they were able to split it up again.
Okay.
And this time the service boundaries were much more stable and effective.
So the takeaway there is that sometimes that monolith actually gives you really valuable information,
Absolutely.
about how different parts of the system are really talking to each other.
It's like a working model. You
Yeah.
can see it in action.
Exactly.
Don't throw away all that knowledge by rushing into microservices based on assumptions.
That makes a lot of sense.
No.
Okay, so you know why you're thinking about microservices.
Yeah.
You're committed to doing it step by step.
Yeah.
You know that the existing system can actually teach you something.
Exactly.
But now the big question, where do you even start splitting?
Right. How do you pick those first candidates to become microservices?
Yeah.
Well, this is where you circle back to your why,
Okay.
your reasons for considering microservices in the first place.
Right.
That should be your guide.
Okay.
So if your goal is to handle more traffic,
Okay.
you focus on the parts of the system that are already bottlenecks
Makes sense.
or the most heavily used parts.
Okay.
If your priority is to speed up development,
Yeah.
then you look at the areas that are changing all the time.
The volatile parts.
Exact.
And there are tools that can help with that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Static analysis tools like CodeScene can pinpoint those volatile areas.
Like hotspots in the code.
Exactly. CodeScene shows you these hotspots where developers are constantly making changes,
Okay.
which often means those areas are either super important business features,
Right.
or the requirements are still changing a lot.
So those hotspots are good candidates for becoming microservices.
Right, because they're either critical or they're in flux.
Yeah.
And CodeScene gives you a visual map of your code base.
Okay.
So you can actually see which parts are changing the most.
Okay.
Imagine a big, brightly colored area in the middle.
Yeah.
That's your biggest hotspot, the most active part of the code.
Got it.
And around it, you might see components labeled like user authentication or order processing.
Okay.
And the tool will show you how often they've changed over time.
So you see the history of changes.
Exactly. And it even uses visual cues like the size and brightness of things to
Okay.
show you how much and how often the code has been changing.
So this hotspot view gives you like data-driven insights.
Right. You can see where all the action is.
Where the development team is spending most of their time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about finding the most volatile areas.
Right.
You also have to consider how realistic it is to actually pull that functionality out. Some parts of the original system might be so intertwined with everything else
Yeah.
that it's almost impossible to separate them.
No.
Others might be so core to the system
Right.
that changing them feels super risky.
Yeah.
And then there might be some parts that seem pretty self-contained
Okay.
and relatively easy to isolate.
So it's a balancing act.
Exactly. You have
Yeah.
to weigh how easy it'll be to extract something
Right.
against the benefits of doing it.
And always keep your goals in mind.
Absolutely. So for those first microservices, aim for the easy wars.
Okay.
Choose functionality that'll have a noticeable impact,
Yeah.
but that's also pretty straightforward to pull out of the existing system.
So don't start with the most complex part right off the bat.
Exactly. Get a few good quick wins under your belt.
Yeah.
It builds confidence and gets the team excited.
What if you try to extract an easy win
Yeah.
and it turns out to be way harder than you thought?
That's a huge red flag. It might mean your organization isn't actually ready for microservices,
No.
or there are hidden dependencies that you haven't uncovered yet.
So even those early struggles are valuable lessons.
Absolutely.
Right.
But the idea is that those early wins and the lessons you learn along the way
Right.
will get the team ready to tackle the tougher challenges later on.
So for someone going into a technical interview where microservices come up,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways?
All right. First, always explain the why behind your architectural choices.
Okay.
Don't just say microservices are good. Be ready to explain the specific goals
Right.
that would make you even consider microservices.
Okay, number 2.
Second, emphasize the importance of an incremental approach.
Right.
No big risky rewrites. Go for a phased migration where you can learn and minimize disruptions.
Got it. Number 3.
Third, show that you understand the existing code base.
Yeah.
Talk about finding those frequently changing areas as potential starting points.
Okay.
And mention tools like CodeScene that can help you find those areas.
And lastly.
And finally, be aware of the dangers of premature optimization.
Right.
Don't just split things up into microservices without truly understanding the domain and its boundaries.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about.
Okay.
Think about a system that you know, well, maybe something you've worked on or heard a lot about.
Yeah.
Based on what we've talked about today, where do you see potential hotspots? And what would be the easiest, most impactful first step if you're moving towards microservices?
Yeah.
And just as important, what other scaling options are out there that aren't microservices?
Yeah.
It's all about critical thinking and understanding how complex systems evolve.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.